The late afternoon sun cast amber light through the kitchen window, illuminating specks of dust that floated lazily in the warm air. James Cordell stood at the back porch grill, turning chicken breasts with practiced precision, the sweet hickory smoke curling up into the Tennessee sky. Beyond the wooden fence, pine trees swayed gently in the breeze, their needles whispering secrets to the gathering dusk. Inside, at the worn oak kitchen table, Ashley sat hunched over her math homework, pencil scratching against paper. Her glasses kept sliding down her nose, and every few seconds she'd push them back up with one finger, her brow furrowed in concentration. She was 12 years old, but carried herself with a quietness that made her seem both younger and older at the same time. People often had to ask her to repeat herself because she spoke so softly, as if afraid her voice might take up too much space in the world. James glanced through the screen door at his daughter, feeling that familiar warmth in his chest. She had her mother's dark hair braided neatly down her back, but her gentle temperament was all his own. At least, that's what he liked to think. "Dad," Ashley called out without looking up. "What 7 times 13? What do you think it is?" James replied, flipping another piece of chicken. Ashley chewed on her pencil eraser. 91. There you go. Trust yourself more, kiddo." A small smile crossed Ashley's face, and she wrote down the answer with renewed confidence. Upstairs, James could hear his wife Jessica's voice, muffled but animated, talking on the phone. He knew without asking that she was speaking with her mother. That particular tone, half exasperated, half defensive, only emerged during conversations with Irene Collier. Jessica had been on the phone for nearly 20 minutes, and James could track the conversation's trajectory by the changing pitch of her voice through the ceiling. The chicken was nearly done when James heard it, the unmistakable sound of Irene's car pulling into the driveway. An older model sedan with a rattling muffler that announced her arrival like a warning siren. He felt his shoulders tense involuntarily. The front door opened without a knock. It never occurred to Irene to knock. "Jessica!" Her voice boomed through the house, sharp and imperious. "Where are you?" James set down the tongs and moved toward the screen door, wiping his hands on a dish towel. Through the mesh, he could see Irene striding through the living room, her purse swinging from her elbow like a weapon. She was a tall woman, big-boned and imposing, with steel-gray hair pulled back tight enough to make her eyes narrow. "I'm upstairs, Mom," Jessica called down. "I'll be right there." Ashley had frozen at the table, her pencil hovering over the paper. James saw the way her small body went rigid, the way her breathing changed. She always reacted this way when her grandmother arrived, like a rabbit sensing a hawk overhead. James stepped inside, letting the screen door close softly behind him. "Evening, Irene." She barely glanced at him. "James!" His name in her mouth always sounded like an accusation. "Where's my daughter?" "Coming down," he said evenly, moving to stand closer to Ashley. His hand rested gently on her shoulder, and he felt her relax slightly under his touch. Jessica appeared at the top of the stairs, still holding her phone. "Mom, what are you doing here? I thought we were talking tomorrow." "Change of plans," Irene said, setting her purse down on the coffee table with enough force to make the wood creak. "I need to talk to you about your sister's situation. She's being completely unreasonable about the inheritance, and I need you to." She stopped mid-sentence, her hand diving into her purse. James watched as she rummaged through it, her movements growing more frantic, more aggressive. Wallet, keys, compact mirror, all tossed aside onto the table. "Where is it?" Irene muttered. Then louder, "Where the hell is it? What's wrong?" Jessica descended the stairs quickly, her face already creasing with concern. "My money. $50. It was right here in the side pocket. I counted it before I left the house." Irene's eyes swept the room like searchlights, and when they landed on Ashley, they narrowed. "Who's been in my purse?" The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. "Nobody," James said immediately. "Your purse has been sitting there for what, 30 seconds?" But Irene wasn't listening to him. She never did. Her gaze was fixed on Ashley, who had gone pale, her small hands gripping the edge of the table. "Ashley, Irene said, her voice taking on that dangerous, syrupy quality that James had learned to recognize as a prelude to cruelty. "Have you touched my purse?" "No, ma'am," Ashley whispered, her voice so quiet it barely carried across the room. "Look at me when I'm talking to you." Ashley's head lifted slowly, and James could see the fear in her eyes, magnified behind her glasses. "I didn't touch it, Grandma. I've been doing homework the whole time." "You're lying." Irene took a step forward, and James felt his muscles coil, preparing. "I can always tell when you're lying. You get that look, just like your father." "Mom," Jessica interjected, but there was uncertainty in her voice, not conviction. "Maybe you left it at home? Or spent it and forgot?" Irene's head whipped toward her daughter. "I know what I had. $50 crisp bills right there in the side pocket. And now it's gone." She turned back to Ashley, her face darkening. "Stand up." Ashley looked at her father, her eyes pleading. "She doesn't need to stand up," James said, his voice calm, but carrying an edge that made Jessica glance at him nervously. "She didn't take your money, Irene. She's been sitting right there where I could see her the whole time." "Oh, so now you're calling me a liar?" Irene's voice rose, filling the small house. "In my own family, I'm a liar?" "This isn't your house," James said quietly, "and nobody's calling anyone a liar. I'm saying Ashley didn't take your money because she didn't. Maybe you miscounted. Maybe it fell out in your car. Don't you dare patronize me." Irene lunged forward, faster than James expected, and grabbed Ashley by her braids. "You little thief! You little liar!" Ashley screamed, a sharp sound of pure terror and pain, as Irene yanked her up from the chair. James was already moving, but the world seemed to slow down, each second stretching into an eternity of horror. He saw Ashley's glasses go askew, saw tears spring instantly to her eyes, saw the cruel satisfaction on Irene's face. "Let her go," James shouted, but Irene had already dragged Ashley 2 steps backward, the girl stumbling, her hands reaching up to try to ease the burning pain in her scalp. That's when Irene's eyes fell on the wooden baseball bat leaning against the wall by the coat rack. Ashley's bat, the one James had bought her last summer when she'd briefly considered joining the school softball team. She'd been too shy to follow through, but the bat remained, a reminder of good intentions. Irene released Ashley's braids and snatched up the bat in one fluid motion. Time snapped back to normal speed. "Irene, don't." James's voice was lost in the chaos. The bat swung through the air with sickening speed, and despite Ashley trying to turn away, try to protect herself, it connected with the side of her head with a crack that seemed to echo off every wall, every surface, boring itself into James's brain where it would live forever. Ashley dropped like a puppet with cut strings. The sound she made hitting the floor, a soft, broken whimper, cut through James's chest like a blade. He was on his knees beside her in an instant, his hands hovering over her, afraid to touch her, afraid of what damage he might find. "Ashley, baby, look at me. Look at Dad." Her eyes were glazed, unfocused. A red mark was already blooming on her temple, spreading like spilled wine. She tried to speak, but only a small moan came out. "Call 911. James barked at Jessica, who stood frozen on the stairs, her hand over her mouth. But Jessica didn't move toward her phone. Instead, she rushed down the remaining stairs and pushed past James, positioning herself between him and her mother. "James, stop." Jessica's voice was shrill, panicked. "Don't you dare lay a hand on her." James stared at his wife, certain he must have misheard. What? She was just defending herself. Ashley must have. She must have provoked her. The words hung in the air like poison gas. James felt something crack inside his chest, something that had been holding his world together. He looked at Jessica, really looked at her, and saw a stranger. Someone he'd shared a bed with for 13 years, someone he'd built a life with, and she was defending the woman who'd just assaulted their child with a weapon. "Get out of my way," James said, his voice so low and controlled it frightened even himself. "No, you're going to hurt her." Behind Jessica, Irene was breathing hard, still holding the bat, her face flushed. But there was something in her eyes now, a flicker of uncertainty, maybe even fear. She'd gone too far, and some part of her knew it. but she'd never admit it. James could see that too. Irene Collier would burn the whole world down before admitting she was wrong. James didn't waste another second on either of them. He gathered Ashley into his arms, careful of her head, and stood. She was so light, so fragile. Her breath was warm against his neck, and he could feel her trembling. "I've got you," he whispered into her hair, carrying her toward the door. "I'm here. You're safe. I promise you're safe." Behind him, Jessica was crying, saying something about overreacting, about her mother not meaning it, about Ashley being dramatic. Each word was another nail in the coffin of their marriage, though James didn't have time to think about that now. He laid Ashley gently in the back seat of his truck, buckling her in, pressing a clean kitchen towel to the swelling on her head. "Dad!" Her voice was small, confused. "Why did Grandma hit me?" James felt rage surge through him so powerfully it made his hand shake. But when he spoke, his voice was steady, gentle. "I don't know, sweetheart, but it's never going to happen again. I promise you that." As he pulled out of the driveway, he saw Jessica and Irene in the doorway, backlit by the warm glow of the house. His house. His home. It didn't feel like home anymore. It felt like enemy territory. And James Cordell had just declared war. The emergency room at Redwater General smelled like antiseptic and burnt coffee. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting everything in a harsh, colorless glow. James sat beside Ashley's bed in the examination room, holding her hand while a young doctor with tired eyes checked her pupils with a penlight. "Follow the light, sweetheart," the doctor said gently. "That's good. Very good." Ashley winced when the light hit her eyes, and James felt his jaw clench so hard his teeth ached. He forced himself to breathe slowly, evenly. Rage wouldn't help Ashley now. Cold calculation would. The doctor stepped back, making notes on her tablet. No signs of severe concussion, which is fortunate, but she's definitely suffered head trauma. We'll want to keep her for observation for a few hours, run a CT scan just to be absolutely certain there's no internal bleeding. "Whatever you need to do," James said. "Cost doesn't matter." The doctor nodded, then glanced at the door before lowering her voice. "Mr. Cordell, I have to ask. The injury pattern, it's consistent with being struck by something cylindrical. A bat, perhaps, or a pipe." She told the nurse her grandmother hit her. "Is that accurate?" James met the doctor's eyes. She was young, but there was steel there. She'd seen things. She knew what questions to ask. "Yes," he said simply. "My mother-in-law struck her with a baseball bat. In our home, in front of me and my wife." The doctor's expression didn't change, but something flickered in her eyes. "I see. And where's your wife now?" "At home," James said, unable to keep the bitterness from his voice. "Defending her mother." The doctor made another note. "Mr. Cordell, I'm required by law to report suspected child abuse. I'm going to make that report tonight. The police will want to speak with you and Ashley." "Good," James said. "I want them to." The doctor looked surprised. In her line of work, James imagined most parents tried to minimize, to explain away, to protect family. But James wasn't interested in protecting anyone except his daughter. "I want a full investigation," he continued, his voice steady and clear. "I want every step documented. My daughter was assaulted in her own home, and I want the person responsible held accountable." The doctor studied him for a moment, then nodded slowly. "I'll make sure everything is properly documented. The police should be here within the hour." After she left, James sat in the uncomfortable plastic chair and watched Ashley sleep. The sedative they'd given her had pulled her under quickly, and now she lay still, her chest rising and falling in the steady rhythm of medicated dreams. The bruise on her temple had darkened to an angry purple, spreading across her pale skin like a stain. He thought about Jessica's words. She must have provoked her. What could a 12-year-old child possibly do to provoke being struck in the head with a weapon? The question was absurd, obscene. But Jessica had said it without hesitation, without even checking on Ashley first. She'd gone immediately to her mother's defense. How long had it been like this? How many smaller cruelties had he missed, too busy with work, too trusting of family bonds? The question gnawed at him. A nurse entered quietly, an older woman with kind eyes and graying hair pulled back in a neat bun. She checked Ashley's vitals, adjusting the 4-drip slightly. She's doing well, the nurse said softly. Kids are resilient. Physically, at least. And the other kind? James asked. The nurse met his eyes. That depends on what happens next. Whether she feels protected. Whether justice is done. She paused, then added, the doctor asked me to let you know that we've started the documentation process. Photos, measurements, the works. Everything will be available for the police. Thank you, James said, meaning it deeply. The nurse hesitated at the door. I've worked here 23 years. I've seen a lot of families come through these doors. Most of them are accidents, mistakes, moments of poor judgment. But every now and then. She looked at Ashley, then back at James. Every now and then, you see something deliberate, something mean, and the question becomes, what are you going to do about it? Everything, James said quietly. I'm going to do everything. The nurse nodded, satisfied, and left. James pulled out his phone and sent a text to his brother in Nashville. Need a lawyer. Family law. The best you know. It's urgent. The response came back in under a minute. What happened? James typed everything. In the hallway outside, he could hear Jessica's voice rising in pitch, arguing with someone, probably the front desk. She'd come after all, but too late, and for all the wrong reasons. He could hear her demanding to see Ashley, demanding to know what the doctors were saying, demanding that James come out and talk to her. He didn't move. Let her demand. Let her rage. Ashley was safe here, protected by hospital staff and locked doors and the impending arrival of law enforcement. For the first time since hearing that sickening crack of wood against skull, James felt something like calm settle over him. Not peace. He wasn't sure he'd ever feel peace again, but purpose. Crystal clear, diamond-hard purpose. He wasn't a violent man. Never had been. He'd spent his whole life avoiding confrontation, seeking compromise, building bridges instead of burning them. But there were some things that couldn't be compromised away. Some bridges that deserved to burn. His daughter had been hurt. His wife had chosen the wrong side. And Irene Collier had made the fatal mistake of thinking she could get away with it. James looked at Ashley's sleeping face and made a promise that would reshape everything that came after. He would protect her, at any cost, by any means necessary. And anyone who stood in the way, family or not, would learn exactly how far a father would go for his child. The war had begun, and James Cordell intended to win it. 2 police officers arrived 40 minutes later. The first was a young patrol officer named Michaels, fresh-faced and eager, still trying to fill out his uniform. The second was Detective Damon Holder, a veteran investigator with 20 years on the force and eyes that missed nothing. He wore plain clothes, khakis, and a button-down shirt, and moved with the economy of someone who'd learned to conserve energy for when it mattered. They interviewed James first in a small consultation room down the hall from Ashley's bed. The room was cramped, containing only a round table and 4 chairs, with motivational posters about hand-washing taped to the walls. Officer Michaels took notes while Detective Holder asked the questions. Walk me through what happened, Holder said, his voice neutral but attentive. Start from the beginning. James did, choosing his words carefully, sticking to facts. The unannounced arrival. The missing money. The accusation. The violence. He kept his voice level, his emotions locked down tight. Hysterics wouldn't help Ashley. Clear testimony would. Your wife, Holder said, flipping through his notes. Jessica Cordell. Where's she now? In the waiting room, I believe, James said. She arrived about 20 minutes ago. And during the incident, what was her position? James met the detective's eyes. She defended her mother, physically placed herself between me and Irene, and told me to stop attacking her, even though I hadn't done anything, even though our daughter was on the floor, injured. Officer Michaels' pen stopped moving. Holder's expression didn't change, but James saw something sharpen in his gaze. She defended the assailant, Holder said flatly. Yes, even though the victim was her own daughter. Yes. Holder was quiet for a moment, processing. Then, Mr. Cordell, I'm going to be direct with you. In cases like this, we often see family members trying to minimize what happened, trying to keep things quiet, preserve relationships. You're not doing that. Why? Because my daughter was assaulted with a weapon, James said simply. And if I minimize it, if I let it slide, what does that teach her? That her safety doesn't matter? That violence is acceptable if it comes from family? I won't do that to her. Holder nodded slowly. We'll need to speak with your daughter and with your wife, and we'll need to bring Mrs. Collier in for questioning. Good, James said. The sooner, the better. After the interview, James returned to Ashley's room to find her awake, staring at the ceiling with unfocused eyes. When she saw him, tears spilled down her cheeks. Hey, James said, rushing to her side. What's wrong? Are you in pain? Is Grandma going to come here? Ashley whispered, her voice thick with fear. James's heart shattered and hardened simultaneously. No, baby. She's not allowed anywhere near you. I promise. Is Mom mad at me? The question nearly broke him. No, sweetheart. None of this is your fault. Not one bit. But Grandma said I took her money, and Mom believed her. James carefully sat on the edge of the bed, taking both of Ashley's hands in his. Listen to me. Your grandmother was wrong. You didn't take anything. And even if you had, which you didn't, nothing justifies what she did. Nothing. Do you understand? Ashley nodded, but uncertainty clouded her eyes. She'd spent 12 years learning to trust the adults in her life, and in one evening, that trust had been shattered. James knew it would take time to rebuild, if it could be rebuilt at all. A knock at the door announced Detective Holder. Mr. Cordell, we need to speak with Ashley now, if she's feeling up to it. James looked at his daughter. You don't have to do this right now if you don't want to. But Ashley straightened slightly, wiping her eyes. I want to. I want to tell them what happened. Pride swelled in James's chest. His daughter was braver than she knew. The interview was gentle, with Detective Holder asking simple, direct questions while Officer Michaels continued taking notes. Ashley spoke softly but clearly, describing the evening in careful detail. How her grandmother had arrived. How she'd accused Ashley of stealing. How she'd grab her by the hair and hit her. Did you take your grandmother's money? Holder asked. No, sir, Ashley said firmly. I was doing homework the whole time. My dad was right outside on the porch. He could see me through the door. Has your grandmother hurt you before? Ashley hesitated, and James saw shame flicker across her face. Not like this, but she's pulled my hair before, and she says mean things sometimes. Calls me stupid if I don't understand something. Mom says that's just how Grandma shows love. Holder and Michaels exchanged a glance that James couldn't quite read, but he felt its significance. After the police left, promising to continue their investigation, Jessica finally burst into the room. Her eyes were red from crying, her hair disheveled, makeup smeared. Ashley, she rushed toward the bed, but James stepped between them. Give her space, he said quietly. Jessica stared at him as if he'd slapped her. She's my daughter. Then act like her mother, James said, his voice still calm, but carrying an unmistakable edge. Protect her. Put her first. I'm here, aren't I? You're 2 hours late, and you came here to defend your mother, not to check on your child. Jessica's face crumpled. That's not fair. I'm trying to keep this family together. This family, James gestured to Ashley, who'd pressed herself back against the pillows, watching the exchange with frightened eyes. Or your mother? Both. James, please, my mother didn't mean to. She hit our daughter in the head with a baseball bat, James said, enunciating each word with careful precision. On purpose. Because she was angry. That's not an accident. That's assault. Jessica opened her mouth, then closed it. Open it again. Ashley, honey, tell Mommy what happened. Tell her exactly what you said to Grandma before. Before what? James interrupted. Before she got assaulted? What magical words could a 12-year-old say that would justify violence? I'm not saying it was justified. I'm just trying to understand. Then understand this. James moved closer to his wife, lowering his voice so Ashley wouldn't hear. Your mother committed a crime tonight. Against our daughter. The police are investigating. The hospital has documented everything. And I will make sure this goes as far as it needs to go to protect Ashley. Jessica's eyes widened. You can't be serious. You're going to press charges? Against my mother, if that's what it takes. James, please, think about what this will do to our family. James looked past his wife to Ashley, who sat in the hospital bed, bruised and frightened and trying so hard to be brave. Then he looked back at Jessica. I am thinking about our family, he said. The question is, are you? Jessica had no answer. She stood there, tears streaming down her face, caught between the mother who'd raised her and the daughter who needed her, and James could see her making her choice in real time. It wasn't the choice he'd hoped for. "I need to call Mom," Jessica said finally, pulling out her phone. She must be so worried. James watched his wife walk out of the room, already dialing, already preparing to console the woman who just hospitalized their child. And in that moment, he understood with terrible clarity that his marriage was already over. It had ended the moment Jessica chose her mother over their daughter. The only question now was how messy the ending would be. They returned home near midnight, Ashley dozing against James's shoulder as he carried her from the truck to her bedroom. The house felt different now, tainted unsafe. Every shadow seemed to hide a threat. Every creak of the floorboards made James tense. Jessica had gone to her mother's house, ostensibly to calm her down. James hadn't tried to stop her. Let them circle their wagons, plot their defense. It would make what came next easier. After tucking Ashley into bed and triple-checking her bedroom door was locked from the inside, James descended to the first floor. The living room looked the same as it had hours earlier. The coffee table, the couch, the coat rack. But now, James saw it as a crime scene. The baseball bat was gone. Jessica or Irene must have taken it, which was a mistake on their part. It showed consciousness of guilt, an attempt to hide evidence. The police would note that. But James had been careful too. Before rushing Ashley to the hospital, even in those first panic moments, a part of his brain had been working with cold precision. He'd grabbed his phone. He'd taken photos. He'd documented the scene before anyone could alter it. Now, alone in the quiet house, he moved through each room methodically. In the kitchen, Ashley's homework still sat on the table, her pencil rolled to one side. In the living room, the coffee table held Irene's purse. She'd left it in her haste to depart, and Jessica hadn't bothered to return it. James put on a pair of cleaning gloves from under the sink and carefully opened the purse. The wallet was there, containing $137 in various bills. Credit cards, insurance cards, old receipts. No missing $50 because there had never been any missing money. Irene had made it up, or perhaps convinced herself it was true. Either way, her accusation had been false. James photographed everything, careful not to disturb the contents, then closed the purse and left it exactly where he'd found it. Then he noticed something that made his pulse quicken, the small, red blinking light in the corner of the living room. The old baby monitor camera, mounted near the ceiling, still plugged in from when Ashley was an infant. They'd never bothered to take it down, and over the years, it had become invisible, just another piece of furniture. But it still recorded. James pulled a chair over and carefully removed the device from its mount. His hands trembled slightly as he carried it to his home office, closing the door and pulling the curtains. He connected it to his laptop and pulled up the video files. There were hundreds of clips, organized by date and time. James scrolled to today, to the evening, and clicked play. The footage was grainy but clear enough. He watched himself on the back porch, visible through the kitchen window, watched Ashley at the table, watched Irene burst through the door, and then he watched the assault unfold in silent, damning detail. Irene's face twisted in rage. Ashley's terror, the grab, the pull, the bat swinging through the air, the impact, the collapse, every second documented, every moment preserved. James copied the file onto 3 separate USB drives. One went into a fireproof safe in his office. One went into his truck's glove compartment. The third went into an envelope, sealed and addressed to his brother in Nashville, with instructions to open it only if something happened to James. He wasn't taking any chances. As the sun began to rise, painting the sky in shades of pink and orange, James sat at his kitchen table with a cup of coffee and his laptop. He drafted an email to his employer, requesting emergency family leave. Then he searched for family law attorneys in the Nashville area, reading reviews, checking credentials, looking for someone with experience in custody cases and protective orders. He found a firm that specialized in protecting children from abusive family members. Their website showed a success rate that made James feel something like hope. He scheduled a consultation for Monday morning, first available slot. Then he opened a new document and began writing down everything that had happened, everything he knew, everything he'd observed about Irene Collier over the years of knowing her. The controlling behavior, the subtle cruelty, the way she spoke to service workers, to Jessica, to Ashley. The comments that seemed harmless in isolation but formed a pattern when viewed together. James had been raised to see the best in people, to give second chances, to believe in redemption. But he'd also been raised to protect those who couldn't protect themselves. And right now, Ashley needed protection more than Irene needed forgiveness. He worked until he heard Ashley stirring upstairs, then closed his laptop and went to check on her. She was sitting up in bed, touching the bruise on her temple gingerly, looking small and lost in her oversized sleep shirt. "Morning, sweetheart," James said softly from the doorway. "How are you feeling?" "My head hurts," Ashley admitted, "and I feel dizzy. That's normal after a concussion. The doctor said you need to rest, take it easy. No screens for a few days, lots of sleep." He moved into the room, sitting on the edge of her bed. "Are you hungry? I can make pancakes." Ashley shook her head, then winced at the movement. "Where's Mom?" "At Grandma's house. But she'll be back later." "Is she mad at me?" The question broke James's heart for the second time in 12 hours. "No, baby. She's not mad at you. She's confused. But that's not your problem. Your only job right now is to heal and feel safe. Can you do that for me?" Ashley nodded slowly, and James saw her trying to be brave, trying to be strong. It wasn't fair that she had to be either. "Dad," her voice was very small, "am I going to have to see Grandma again?" James took his daughter's hand, holding it gently. "Not if you don't want to, and maybe not ever again. I'm going to make sure you're protected, Ashley. Whatever it takes. Even if Mom gets mad, even then." Ashley processed this, her young mind working through implications that no child should have to consider. Finally, she said, "Okay, I trust you." Those 3 words, "I trust you," carried more weight than any verdict, any judgment, any legal decree ever could. James had been given a sacred charge, and he would not fail. He would not let his daughter down, no matter what it cost. The house felt different in the days that followed, as if the walls themselves remembered what had happened within them. James moved through the rooms with heightened awareness, noticing details he'd overlooked before. The scratch marks on the hardwood floor where the bat had been dragged, the slight dent in the doorframe from when Irene had shoved past Jessica, the blood, Ashley's blood, that had soaked into the living room rug where she'd fallen. He cleaned it all meticulously, documenting everything first with photographs, then erasing the physical evidence while preserving the digital proof. The rug went into the garbage. The doorframe got spackled and painted. The house began to look normal again, but James knew better. Normalcy was a lie they told themselves to feel safe. Ashley stayed home from school Monday and Tuesday per doctor's orders. James worked from his home office, keeping her close, checking on her every hour. She spent most of the time in her room, reading or drawing, speaking less than usual, which was saying something for a child who already spoke softly. Jessica returned Monday afternoon, letting herself in with her key like nothing had changed. She found James in the kitchen, preparing lunch for Ashley. "We need to talk," Jessica said without preamble. "We do," James agreed, not looking up from the sandwich he was making. "But not here. Ashley doesn't need to hear this." They moved to the back porch, closing the glass door behind them. The October air had turned cool, carrying the smell of burning leaves from a neighbor's yard. James stood with his arms crossed, waiting. Jessica spoke first, her words tumbling out in a rush. "My mother is devastated. She's been crying for 3 days straight. She never meant to hurt Ashley, James. You know that. She just got angry, and things got out of hand, and she assaulted our daughter with a weapon." James interrupted, his voice flat. "That's not getting out of hand. That's a crime. It was a mistake." "No." James finally looked at his wife, really looked at her, and saw the vast gulf that now separated them. A mistake is grabbing the wrong carton of milk at the store. A mistake is forgetting someone's birthday. Hitting a child in the head with a bat? That's a choice. Your mother made a choice, and now she gets to live with the consequences. Jessica's eyes filled with tears. "You don't understand what you're doing. If you press charges, if this goes to court, it'll destroy her. She could go to jail, James. My mother could go to jail. And our daughter could have died, James said quietly. Has that occurred to you? If that bat had hit 2 inches to the left, if she'd swung any harder, we might be planning a funeral instead of talking about consequences. Jessica flinched as if struck. Don't say that. Why not? It's true. Because it didn't happen. Because I was there. Because I got Ashley to the hospital in time. But what about next time, Jessica? What happens when your mother gets angry again? When someone else doesn't jump when she says jump? Who gets hurt then? There won't be a next time. Mom promised. James laughed, a sound devoid of humor. Oh, she promised? Well, that changes everything. I'm sure the police will be so relieved to hear that Irene Collier promised not to assault any more children. You're being cruel. I'm being realistic. James moved closer to his wife, close enough to see the sleepless nights written in the circles under her eyes, the worry lines around her mouth. Jessica, I need you to hear what I'm saying. Really hear it. Your mother hurt our daughter. Badly. Deliberately. And you're asking me to just let it go, to pretend it didn't happen, to risk it happening again. I can't do that. I won't. So, what? You're going to send my mother to prison? Destroy our family. Your mother destroyed our family the moment she picked up that bat. James's voice broke slightly, the first crack in his armor. And you helped finish the job when you took her side over Ashley's. Jessica stared at him, and James saw the moment she decided to dig in, to commit fully to her chosen path. I'm not taking sides. I'm trying to keep this family together. Then pick your daughter. Right now. Choose Ashley. Silence stretched between them, filled only by the distant sound of a lawnmower and the rustle of wind through pine trees. Jessica's face worked through a dozen different emotions: guilt, anger, fear, love, resentment, desperation. But when she finally spoke, James knew what her answer would be before the words left her lips. I can't just abandon my mother. She needs me. And your daughter? Ashley has you. The words were soft, defeated, and they marked the end of something that had taken 13 years to build and 3 days to dismantle. James nodded slowly. She does. And you've just made this very simple for me. What does that mean? It means I'm filing for divorce. And I'm seeking full custody. Jessica's face went white. You can't be serious. I've never been more serious about anything in my life. James pulled a folded envelope from his back pocket, papers he'd picked up from the attorney that morning. These are temporary separation documents. I need you to move out, Jessica, today. This is my house. This is Ashley's house. And she doesn't feel safe with you here, defending the woman who hurt her. James handed her the envelope, and when Jessica didn't take it, he set it on the patio table. My lawyer says you have to be out within 24 hours. You can stay at your mother's. I'm sure she'd love the company. James, please. Jessica's voice cracked, tears streaming down her face now. Don't do this. We can fix this. We can go to counseling, work things out. There's nothing to fix, James said, and he meant it. The crack in his chest had hardened into something unbreakable. You made your choice. Now live with it. He went back inside, leaving Jessica on the porch, and locked the door behind him. Through the glass, he could see her standing there, shoulders shaking with sobs, the envelope still sitting on the table where he'd left it. James felt something that might have been regret, or might have been relief. Maybe both. But mostly, he felt certainty. This was the right path, the only path, even if it hurt like hell to walk it. Upstairs, Ashley called out, "Dad, is everything okay?" James climbed the stairs, composing his face, preparing the words. "Everything's fine, sweetheart. How's your head?" "Better," Ashley said, though she still touched it gingerly. "I heard voices. Was that Mom?" "It was." James sat on the edge of her bed. "Listen, there are going to be some changes around here. Mom's going to be staying somewhere else for a while. Just you and me, okay?" Ashley processed this, her eyes searching his face. "Because of what happened?" "Yeah, because of what happened. Is it my fault?" "No." James took both her hands. "Listen to me, Ashley. None of this, not one single thing, is your fault. Adults are responsible for their own choices. Your grandmother chose to hurt you. Your mother chose to defend that choice. I'm choosing to protect you. These are our decisions, our responsibilities. You just get to be a kid and heal and know that you're loved. Okay. Ashley nodded, and James saw something ease in her posture, some tension release. Okay. He squeezed her hands gently. I'm going to make dinner. What sounds good? Grilled cheese. Grilled cheese it is. As James descended the stairs again, he heard his phone buzzing on the kitchen counter. A text from Detective Holder. Need to speak with you. Can you come to the station tomorrow morning? 9 a.m.? James replied, I'll be there. Then another text, this one from his attorney. Spoke with prosecutor's office. They're interested in the case. Call me when you can. Things were moving forward. The wheels of justice, slow and grinding, but moving nonetheless. James felt a grim satisfaction. Every step forward was a step towards safety for Ashley. That was all that mattered. Jessica finally left around 7 that evening, taking a suitcase of clothes and not much else. She didn't say goodbye to Ashley, though whether that was from shame or anger, James couldn't tell. Maybe both. After she was gone, the house felt quieter but also lighter, as if an oppressive weight had been lifted. James made grilled cheese sandwiches and tomato soup, and he and Ashley ate together at the kitchen table, not talking much, just being present in the silence. Dad, Ashley said as they finished eating. Yeah. Thank you. For everything. James felt his throat tighten. You don't need to thank me, sweetheart. Taking care of you. That's my job. My privilege. And I'm going to keep doing it, no matter what. Ashley smiled, small but genuine. And in that moment, James knew with absolute certainty that he'd made the right choices. Every single one of them. Even the ones that hurt. The Redwater Police Department occupied a squat brick building downtown, sandwiched between a hardware store and a barbershop that had been there since the 1950s. James arrived at 8:50 the next morning, deliberately early, and waited in the small lobby with its scuffed linoleum floors and outdated wanted posters on the walls. Detective Holder emerged at exactly 9 o'clock, shaking James's hand with a firm grip. Thanks for coming in. Let's talk in my office. The office was small and cluttered, papers stacked on every surface, a computer monitor displaying what looked like traffic cam footage. Holder cleared off a chair for James and sat behind his desk, pulling out a thick folder. I've been doing some digging, Holder said without preamble, into your mother-in-law's background, and I found something interesting. James leaned forward. What kind of something? 15 years ago, there was a complaint filed against Irene Collier. Domestic dispute involving her son, your wife's younger brother. You know about him? James frowned. Jessica mentioned having a brother once or twice, but she always said he moved away years ago, cut off contact with the family. She never wanted to talk about it. Holder nodded slowly. That tracks. The complaint describes a pattern of physical abuse, grabbing, hair pulling, striking with objects. The son was 17 at the time. He reported that his mother had thrown a ceramic plate at his head during an argument, causing a laceration that required stitches. James felt his stomach turn. What happened with the case? It was dropped. The son recanted his statement, said he'd overreacted, that it was just family stress. Classic abuse victim behavior, protecting the abuser. Holder tapped the folder. But the initial police report is still on file. Very detailed descriptions of the mother's behavior, her temper, her methods of control. Why are you telling me this? Because patterns matter, Mr. Cordell. In court, a single incident can be explained away as a momentary lapse in judgment, a one-time mistake. But a pattern? That's character. That's who someone really is. Holder leaned back in his chair. I've also spoken with CPS. They've opened an investigation, and they'll be interviewing Ashley again soon. But more importantly, I've been in contact with the district attorney's office. James's heart rate picked up, and they want to prosecute. Aggravated assault, child endangerment, assault with a deadly weapon. If convicted, your mother-in-law is looking at serious prison time. The weight of those words settled over James like a heavy blanket. Prison. Irene Collier, behind bars. Part of him wanted to feel guilty about that, wanted to feel conflicted. But mostly, he felt relieved. What do you need from me? James asked. Your testimony. Ashley's testimony, if she's comfortable giving it. Any evidence you might have, photos, medical records, witness statements. The stronger the case we build, the harder it is for her attorney to get the charges reduced or dismissed. James pulled out his phone, scrolling to the photos he'd taken that night. I documented everything. The scene, Ashley's injuries, all of it. And I have something else. He told Holder about the baby monitor camera, about the footage it had captured. Holder's expression sharpened with interest. You still have it? The recording? I have copies. Multiple copies stored in different locations. Holder whistled low. Mr. Cordell, that's a prosecutor's dream. Clear video evidence of the assault from a neutral source? This case just got a whole lot stronger. What happens now? Now we build the case. I'll need that video footage. We'll enter it into evidence. The DA will probably want to meet with you and Ashley, prepare you both for testimony. And Holder hesitated. There's something else. Your wife, Jessica. She's been calling the station, trying to get information, trying to talk to me about her mother's side of the story. Let me guess. Her mother was just defending herself. Something like that. She's also been suggesting that Ashley might have exaggerated her injuries, or that the whole thing was somehow misunderstood. James felt anger surge through him, hot and bright. My wife is trying to undermine her own daughter's testimony. It appears that way, which is why I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me. Holder leaned forward, his gaze intense. Is there any possibility that your wife might try to influence Ashley's testimony, coach her to change her story, or downplay what happened? The question hung in the air between them. James thought about Jessica, about the woman he'd married, about the choices she'd made over the past week. And he realized that yes, it was possible, more than possible. If Irene asked her to, Jessica would probably try. I filed for divorce, James said quietly, and I'm seeking full custody. Jessica hasn't been allowed unsupervised access to Ashley since the incident. Holder nodded, unsurprised. Smart. Keep it that way. The last thing we need is witness tampering added to this mess. They spent the next hour going over details, with James providing dates, times, specific conversations. Holder took meticulous notes, asking clarifying questions, building a timeline. By the time James left the station, it was nearly 11, and he felt simultaneously exhausted and energized. The system was working. Slowly, methodically, but working. Irene would face consequences. Ashley would be protected. Justice in its grinding, imperfect way was being served. James stopped at a coffee shop on the way home, needing caffeine and a moment to decompress. While waiting for his order, his phone rang. An unknown number with a local area code. Hello. Is this James Cordell? A woman's voice, unfamiliar. Yes. Who's this? My name is Patricia Simmons. I'm an attorney representing Irene Collier. I'd like to speak with you about dropping the charges against my client. James felt his jaw clench. I'm not dropping anything. Mr. Cordell, please hear me out. Mrs. Collier is deeply remorseful about what happened. She's willing to enter family counseling, make restitution for any medical expenses, do whatever it takes to make this right. But pursuing criminal charges, that's not going to help anyone. It's just going to tear your family apart. My family is already torn apart, James said coldly. Your client saw to that when she hit my daughter with a baseball bat. It was a momentary lapse in judgment. It was assault. And no, I will not be dropping the charges, agreeing to mediation, accepting apologies, or doing anything else that lets your client avoid the consequences of her actions. She hurt a child, my child, and she's going to answer for that in a court of law. Mr. Cordell, I don't think you understand the implications. I understand perfectly. Your client is facing prison time, and you're trying to make that go away. It's not going to work. Goodbye, Ms. Simmons. James ended the call and stood there in the coffee shop, hands trembling slightly with suppressed rage. The attorney's words echoed in his head, momentary lapse in judgment, as if years of abusive behavior, a documented history of violence, could be explained away with 5 words. His coffee arrived, and James took it outside, sitting on a bench in the autumn sunshine, forcing himself to breathe slowly, to center himself. Getting angry wouldn't help. Staying focused would. He pulled out his phone and called his own attorney, filling her in on the conversation. She listened quietly, then said, They're going to try every angle to get this case dismissed or reduced. Expect more calls like that. My advice? Don't engage. Refer them to me, and let me handle it. Done, James said. How's Ashley doing? Better. The physical injuries are healing. The rest. James trailed off. That'll take longer. Kids are resilient. With the right support, she'll come through this. And James? You're doing the right thing. I know it doesn't always feel like it, but you are. After ending the call, James sat for a few more minutes, watching people pass by on the sidewalk. Mothers with strollers, teenagers with backpacks, elderly couples walking hand in hand. Normal life, continuing uninterrupted while his own life had been turned inside out. But he didn't regret it. Even in the hardest moments, even when doubt tried to creep in, James knew with bone-deep certainty that he was doing exactly what a father should do. He was protecting his child, and he wasn't going to stop until she was safe. Child Protective Services arrived at James's house 2 days later. 2 caseworkers, both women in their 50s wearing professional attire and carrying tablets for note-taking. James had been expecting this. Holder had warned him it was coming, but it still made his stomach clench to see their official badges, their serious expressions. He let them in, offering coffee which they declined, and sat with them in the living room while Ashley was at school. Mr. Cordell, the lead caseworker, said, introducing herself as Linda Marsh. We're here to follow up on the report filed by Redwater General. We need to assess the current living situation and determine whether Ashley is safe here. She's safe, James said firmly. My mother-in-law is not allowed anywhere near this property. My wife has moved out. It's just me and Ashley now. The other caseworker, whose nameplate read T. Washington, made notes on her tablet. We'll need to interview Ashley as well. Is she comfortable talking with us? I think so. She's been handling this better than I expected, honestly. She's tough. Linda nodded. We'll need to see her room, talk with her privately, and assess her overall well-being. We're not here to judge you, Mr. Cordell. We're here to make sure Ashley is in a safe environment. They spent the next hour going through the house, asking questions, taking more notes. James showed them Ashley's room, the safety measures he'd put in place. New locks on the doors, a security system he'd had installed, the documentation he'd been keeping of everything. When Ashley came home from school that afternoon, James pulled her aside first, explaining who the visitors were and why they were there. They just want to make sure you're okay, he said gently. They're going to ask you some questions. You don't have to be scared. Just tell them the truth. Ashley nodded, her face serious, and went into the living room. James waited in the kitchen, close enough to intervene if needed, but far enough to give her privacy. He could hear the murmur of voices, but couldn't make out specific words. 20 minutes later, the caseworkers emerged. Linda's expression had softened considerably. Mr. Cordell, your daughter is remarkably articulate and brave. She gave us a very clear account of what happened, and she expressed feeling safe here with you. Relief flooded through James. So, based on our assessment, there's no reason to remove Ashley from your care. However, we will be opening a case file and conducting follow-up visits over the next few months, just to ensure ongoing safety. We'll also be investigating the perpetrator, Mrs. Collier, to determine what risk she poses to other children. She has grandchildren, James said suddenly, remembering. Jessica's sister has 2 kids. They live in Memphis. Linda and Washington exchanged glances. We'll need those contact details, Linda said. If Mrs. Collier has a pattern of violence toward children, we need to ensure all potential victims are protected. James provided the information, feeling a grim satisfaction. Irene's actions weren't just affecting Ashley anymore. The ripples were spreading, touching every corner of her life, exposing the truth that had been hidden for too long. After the caseworkers left, James found Ashley in her room, curled up on her bed with a book. How'd it go? He asked from the doorway. Okay, I guess. They asked a lot of questions. I'm proud of you. That couldn't have been easy. Ashley looked up at him, and James saw something new in her eyes. Not fear, not uncertainty, but a kind of quiet strength. She'd been through something terrible, and she was surviving. More than surviving. She was finding her voice. Dad, she said, they asked me if I was scared to see Grandma again. And I said yes. But then I remembered that you promised to protect me, and I felt, I don't know, less scared, I guess. James's eyes burned. I meant that promise, sweetheart. Every word. I know. Ashley smiled, small but genuine. That's why I'm not scared anymore. That evening, as James prepared dinner and Ashley did homework at the kitchen table, the same table where this had all started, his phone buzzed with a text from Detective Holder. Warrant issued for Irene Collier's arrest. Executing tomorrow morning. Thought you'd want to know. James read the message 3 times, letting it sink in. Tomorrow, Irene would be arrested. Tomorrow, she would face the first real consequence of her actions. Tomorrow, the world would start to look a little bit more like justice. He glanced at Ashley, bent over her math problems, occasionally pushing her glasses up her nose, completely absorbed in her work. She looked so normal, so peaceful, like nothing had ever happened. But James knew better. The scars were there, invisible but real. They would heal with time and care and love, but they would always be there. A reminder of what had been lost and what had been fought for. And as James turned back to the stove, stirring pasta sauce and listening to his daughter humming softly to herself, he felt something he hadn't felt in days. Hope. Not for his marriage. That was dead and buried. Not for reconciliation with his in-laws. That ship had sailed and sunk. But hope for Ashley, for her future, for the life she could build now that the person who'd hurt her would be held accountable. Hope that maybe, just maybe, they were going to be okay. The morning of Irene Collier's arrest dawned clear and cold, frost glittering on the grass like scattered diamonds. James stood at his kitchen window with a cup of coffee, watching the sun rise over the pine trees, and thought about the series of dominoes that had been set in motion by one moment of violence. His phone had been buzzing all morning. Texts from Jessica, increasingly frantic, begging him to call her, to talk sense into the police, to stop this before it went too far. James deleted each one without reading past the first line. There was nothing left to say to her. At precisely 7:30, his phone rang. Detective Holder. We have her, Holder said without preamble. Picked her up at her house 20 minutes ago. She's being processed now. How'd she react? About how you'd expect. Lots of shouting about injustice, about how she's being persecuted, about how her daughter and son-in-law are ruining her life. Classic deflection. Didn't take responsibility for a single thing. James wasn't surprised. People like Irene never did. In their minds, they were always the victim, always the wronged party, no matter what destruction they left in their wake. What happens now? James asked. Arraignment, probably this afternoon. Judge will set bail. Given the nature of the charges and her lack of criminal history, she'll probably get out. But she'll have conditions. No contact with Ashley. Restraining order, the works. Good. James. Holder's voice changed, became more serious. I need you to be prepared. This is going to get ugly. Irene's attorney is going to come after you hard. Try to paint you as vindictive. Try to make this about family drama instead of what it really is. They're going to dig into your life, your marriage, everything. Are you ready for that? I'm ready, James said and meant it. I've got nothing to hide. That's what I thought. Just wanted to make sure. I'll keep you posted on developments. After ending the call, James went upstairs to wake Ashley for school. She'd been sleeping better lately, the nightmares that had plagued her first few nights gradually fading. The bruise on her temple had turned yellow-green, the final stages of healing. Morning, sweetheart, he said softly, sitting on the edge of her bed. Time to get up. Ashley stirred, blinking sleepily. What time is it? 7:40. You've got plenty of time. As she sat up, rubbing her eyes, James debated whether to tell her about Irene's arrest. Part of him wanted to shield her from it, to let her just be a kid without worrying about adult consequences. But another part knew she deserved to know, deserved to understand that actions had repercussions, that justice, however imperfect, was being served. Ashley, he said carefully, I need to tell you something. Your grandmother was arrested this morning. Ashley's eyes widened. Arrested? Like taken to jail? Yes. The police came and arrested her because of what she did to you. She'll have to go to court and face charges. Ashley processed this information, her expression cycling through surprise, fear, and finally something that looked almost like relief. Does that mean she can't come here anymore? That's exactly what it means. The judge will make it official, but yes, she's not allowed to come near you. Good, Ashley said softly. Then, seeming to realize how that sounded, she added, is it bad that I'm glad? I don't want to see her. James pulled his daughter into a gentle hug. No, sweetheart. It's not bad at all. It's completely normal to want to stay away from someone who hurt you. You don't owe her anything. Not forgiveness, not another chance, nothing. You get to decide how you feel, and whatever you feel is okay. Ashley nodded against his shoulder, and James felt her relax slightly, as if she'd been carrying guilt she could finally put down. Jessica appeared on James's doorstep that afternoon, her face blotchy from crying, her hair uncombed. She looked like she hadn't slept in days, which she probably hadn't. They arrested her, Jessica said without greeting, her voice hoarse. They came to her house and handcuffed her like a criminal. She is a criminal, James replied evenly, not inviting her inside. She assaulted a child. She's my mother, and Ashley is our daughter. Or have you forgotten that? Jessica's face crumpled. Please, James, please, call the prosecutor. Tell them you want to drop the charges. We can handle this as a family. We don't need the courts involved. It's too late for that. Even if I wanted to drop it, which I don't, the state is prosecuting. This isn't a civil matter anymore. It's criminal. You did this. Jessica's voice rose, taking on a hysterical edge. You pushed for this. You could have just let it go, but you had to make it into this huge thing. I made it into a huge thing. James felt his own anger rising hot and bright. Jessica, your mother hit our daughter in the head with a baseball bat. I didn't make that huge. It already was huge. I just refused to pretend it wasn't. She's going to prison. Jessica was crying openly now, mascara running down her cheeks. My mother is going to prison because of you. No, James said, his voice deadly calm. Your mother's going to prison because of your mother. Because she chose violence. Because she has a history of violence that we're only now discovering. Because she's dangerous. Jessica and dangerous people need to be held accountable before they hurt someone else. You don't understand. I understand perfectly. I understand that you're more concerned with protecting your mother than protecting your daughter. I understand that you've made your choice, and I've made mine. And I understand that this conversation is over. James stepped back, preparing to close the door. You'll be hearing from my attorney about the divorce proceedings and custody arrangements. Don't come here again. James, wait. No. He met her eyes, and she must have seen something there that convinced her argument was futile, because she stepped back from the door. Goodbye, Jessica. He closed the door firmly and locked it, then stood there listening to her sob on the other side before finally, mercifully, walking away. Her car started, pulled out of the driveway, and disappeared down the street. James leaned against the door, feeling the weight of everything settling on his shoulders. Ending a marriage, even one that had already died, wasn't easy. There was grief there, mourning for what might have been, what should have been. But there was also clarity, and purpose, and the absolute certainty that he was doing the right thing. Irene's arraignment happened that afternoon, and true to Holder's prediction, she made bail. $50,000 secured by her house, and she was released with a laundry list of conditions. No contact with Ashley, no contact with James, stay at least 500 feet from their home and Ashley's school, surrender her passport, and wear a monitoring ankle bracelet. The hearing transcript arrived on James's phone via his attorney, and he read through it with grim satisfaction. Irene had tried to argue that the restrictions were too harsh, that she needed to be able to see her grandchildren, plural, which confirmed she had others, that this was all a misunderstanding blown out of proportion. The judge had been unmoved. The evidence was too clear, the injuries too documented. Irene Collier would await trial under strict supervision. But James wasn't naive. He knew that ankle bracelets could be removed, that restraining orders were just pieces of paper, that desperate people did desperate things. He upgraded the security system, added cameras around the property's perimeter, and began varying his and Ashley's routines so they wouldn't be predictable. You're worried she'll come here, Ashley observed one evening, watching her father check the window locks for the third time. James paused, considering whether to be honest or reassuring. He chose honest. I'm being careful. Your grandmother is angry, and angry people sometimes make bad decisions. But we're protected. The police know about the situation. We have the security system, and I'm not taking any chances. I'm not scared, Ashley said, and she sounded like she meant it. Not with you here. That simple faith, that trust, nearly broke James. He sat beside his daughter on the couch, putting an arm around her shoulders. You're braver than I was at your age. You know that? You're brave now. That's what matters. James smiled, surprised by her wisdom. What'd she gotten so insightful? Maybe she'd always been this way, and he was only now paying close enough attention to notice. 2 days later, Detective Holder called with news that changed everything. James, we've been digging deeper into Irene's past. That old complaint from her son? That led us to interview him. He lives in Oregon now, completely cut off from the family. And he had a lot to say. James's pulse quickened. Like what? Like describing years of physical and psychological abuse. Hair pulling, throwing objects, violent outbursts over minor things. He left Tennessee the day he turned 18 and never looked back. He also mentioned that Irene had done the same things to Jessica when she was young. The words hit James like a punch to the gut. Jessica had been a victim too. That explained so much. Her defensiveness, her inability to see her mother clearly, her automatic protection of her abuser. It was a cycle, passed down and perpetuated. There's more, Holder continued. We contacted Jessica's sister in Memphis, the one with 2 kids. She's been limiting Irene's access to her grandchildren for the past year because of concerning behavior. She never reported anything officially, but she's willing to testify about what she witnessed. What kind of concerning behavior? Grabbing one of the kids by the arm hard enough to leave bruises, screaming in their faces over spilled juice, threatening to teach them a lesson with a wooden spoon. The sister said she'd been trying to protect her kids without causing family drama. But now that this has come to light, she's ready to speak up. James closed his eyes, picturing a family tree with Irene at the center, branches of trauma extending out in every direction. How many people had she hurt? How many had stayed silent, trying to keep the peace? This makes our case even stronger, Holder said. We're not dealing with a one-time loss of temper. We're dealing with a pattern of abuse spanning decades and multiple victims. The prosecutor is going to have a field day. After ending the call, James sat in his office, staring at the wall, processing. Part of him felt vindicated. His instincts about Irene had been correct. But another part felt only sadness for all the people who'd suffered at her hands, especially Jessica, his ex-wife. He'd started thinking of her that way already, had been shaped by violence, had normalized it, had even perpetuated it by defending her mother. Breaking that cycle wasn't going to be easy. Maybe it wasn't possible at all. But James wasn't giving up on Ashley. Whatever it took, however long it took, he would make sure his daughter knew that violence wasn't love, that abuse wasn't normal, that she deserved safety and respect and tenderness. He would break the cycle, even if it cost him everything. The preliminary hearing was scheduled for late November, just before Thanksgiving. James spent weeks preparing, meeting with the prosecutor, reviewing his testimony, making sure every detail was documented and clear. The prosecutor, a sharp-eyed woman named Adriana Mills, was thorough and relentless. This is one of the clearest cases I've handled in years, she told James during one of their prep sessions. We have video evidence, medical documentation, multiple witnesses, and a pattern of behavior. Unless Irene takes a plea deal, this is going to trial, and when it does, we're going to win. What kind of plea deal? James asked. Probably reduced charges in exchange for a guilty plea. Maybe aggravated assault down to simple assault, which would mean less prison time. But given the severity and the pattern, I'm pushing for the maximum. How much time are we talking about? If convicted on all counts? 10 to 15 years, possibly. With her age and lack of prior convictions, she might get less. But she'll serve time, James. I can promise you that. The thought of Irene in prison should have given James satisfaction, but mostly he just felt tired. This wasn't vengeance. This was just necessary, like amputating a gangrenous limb. Painful, but required for survival. Ashley had been informed about the hearing and what it would involve. She listened quietly, asked a few questions, and then said something that surprised James. "I want to go to the hearing. I want to see her face when they talk about what she did." James had hesitated, wanting to protect her from that exposure. But his attorney had encouraged it, saying Ashley's presence in the courtroom could be powerful testimony in itself, showing the judge and prosecutor that she wasn't hiding, wasn't intimidated. So on a gray November morning, James and Ashley walked into the county courthouse together, hand in hand. Ashley wore a simple blue dress and her glasses, her hair in its usual braid. She looked young and small, and James felt a fierce surge of protectiveness. The courtroom was smaller than James had expected, with worn wooden benches and fluorescent lights that hummed faintly. Irene sat at the defense table with her attorney, Patricia Simmons, a polished woman in an expensive suit. When Irene saw Ashley enter, her face twisted with an emotion James couldn't quite read. Anger, maybe, or shame, or defiant righteousness. Jessica was there too, sitting in the gallery behind her mother, and when she saw Ashley, she half stood, her face filled with longing. But Ashley didn't look at her. She kept her eyes forward, her hand tight in her father's. The hearing itself was procedural, argument about evidence, legal standards, probable cause. But when the prosecutor played the video from the baby monitor camera on the courtroom screen, the atmosphere changed. There was in grainy but unmistakable detail. Irene grabbing Ashley by the hair, Ashley's screams, the bat swinging, the impact, the fall. The courtroom watched in silence, and James watched the judge's face darken with each passing second. When the video ended, the judge looked at Irene with undisguised disgust. "Mrs. Collier," she said, her voice sharp as broken glass. "I've seen a lot of my years on the bench, but this is one of the most clear-cut cases of child abuse I've ever witnessed." Irene's attorney tried to interject, but the judge raised a hand, silencing her. "The prosecution has more than met its burden for probable cause. This case will proceed to trial. Additionally, I'm modifying Mrs. Collier's bail conditions. The monitoring bracelet stays. The no-contact order stays. And I'm adding a requirement for psychological evaluation." The judge's eyes found Ashley in the gallery. "That child deserves justice, and I'm going to make damn sure she gets it." The gavel came down with a sharp crack, and the hearing was over. In the hallway afterward, James knelt down to Ashley's level. "How are you doing?" "I'm okay," Ashley said, and she sounded it. "It was hard to watch, but I'm glad everyone saw. Now they know I wasn't lying." "We always knew you weren't lying, sweetheart." "I know, but now everyone knows." They were walking toward the exit when Jessica appeared, moving quickly, her face desperate. "Ashley, please just talk to me for 1 minute." "No," James said firmly, stepping between them. "You heard the judge. This isn't the time or place." "She's my daughter." "Then act like her mother." James's voice was quiet but cutting. "Choose her, Jessica. For once in your life, choose your daughter over your mother." Jessica's face crumpled, but before she could respond, her mother's attorney appeared, taking Jessica by the arm and leading her away, probably fearing she'd say something that would hurt their case. James and Ashley left the courthouse and drove home in silence, the weight of everything settling around them. It was done now, or at least the first phase was done. The case was moving forward. Justice was in motion. That evening, James made Ashley's favorite dinner, spaghetti and meatballs with garlic bread, and they ate together while watching a nature documentary about wolves. Normal things, safe things, things that had nothing to do with courtrooms and violence and broken families. "Dad," Ashley said during a commercial break. "Yeah. Do you think Mom will ever choose me?" "Like you said." James considered the question carefully, wanting to be honest but not cruel. "I don't know, sweetheart. I hope so. But whether she does or not, you'll be okay. You have me, and I choose you every single time." Ashley nodded, accepting this, and returned her attention to the documentary. But James saw the sadness in her eyes, the hole where her mother's love should have been, and he felt rage kindle again in his chest. Jessica had a choice. Every day, she had a choice. And every day, she chose wrong. Maybe one day that would change. Maybe one day she'd wake up and realize what she'd lost what she'd sacrificed for a woman who'd abused her, controlled her, twisted her into someone who couldn't protect her own child. But James wasn't holding his breath. He'd made his choice too, and unlike Jessica, he wasn't going to waver. The trial was set for February, 3 months away. 3 months of preparation, of living under the shadow of what was coming, of waiting for the justice that moved so slowly it sometimes seemed not to move at all. During those months, James and Ashley built a new life. A quieter life. A safer life. James worked from home most days, his employer understanding about the circumstances. Ashley returned to school, where her teachers had been briefed on the situation and kept extra watch. She started seeing a therapist, a gentlewoman named Dr. Reeves who specialized in childhood trauma. Slowly, carefully, Ashley began to process what had happened and learned that it wasn't her fault, had never been her fault. The divorce proceedings moved forward with surprising speed. Jessica contested nothing, didn't fight for custody, didn't ask for assets, seemed to have given up entirely. She'd moved in with her mother, despite the fact that Irene was facing prison time, and according to James's attorney, the two of them were like a fortress, united against the world. They've convinced themselves they're the victims here, his attorney said. It's classic abuse psychology. Rather than face the truth, they've constructed an alternate reality where you're the villain and they're the persecuted innocents. Does that hurt our case? Not even slightly. Reality doesn't care about their delusions. Christmas came and went quietly. James and Ashley decorated a small tree, exchanged modest gifts, watched holiday movies curled up on the couch. It should have felt sad, this first holiday without the family intact, but instead it felt peaceful, calm, like they were finally safe enough to breathe. On Christmas morning, Ashley gave James a drawing she'd made in art therapy. 2 figures, a tall one and a short one, holding hands against the sunset. Underneath, in her careful handwriting, she'd written, "My dad, my hero." James hung in his office where he could see it every day. January brought bitter cold and heavy snow. The trial date loomed closer. James met with Prosecutor Mills multiple times, preparing his testimony, reviewing the evidence. The video footage, the medical records, the testimony from Irene's son and Jessica's sister, Detective Holder's investigation, it all pointed to one inescapable conclusion. Irene Collier was guilty. The question wasn't whether she'd committed the crime. The question was how long she'd spend in prison for it. A week before the trial, Irene's attorney reached out with a final plea deal. Plead guilty to aggravated assault. Accept a sentence of 5 years with possibility of parole after 2. No trial, no drawn-out proceedings, just quick resolution. Mills called James to discuss it. It's not terrible, considering. She'd serve real time, have a felony conviction, and Ashley wouldn't have to testify. What do you think we'd get if we go to trial? James asked. Honestly, with the evidence we have, 8 to 10 years, possibly more. But trials are unpredictable. Juries can be swayed by sympathy, by a good defense attorney spinning the narrative. This plea deal is a guarantee. James thought about Ashley, about whether putting her through a trial would be worth the extra years of Irene's incarceration. He thought about the toll it might take, the exposure, the questions from defense attorneys. Then he thought about justice, about sending a message, about making sure everyone understood that hurting children had serious, lasting consequences. No deal, James said. We go to trial. Mills was quiet for a moment. Then, are you sure? I need to know you've really thought this through. I have. And I'm sure. My daughter deserves to see this through to the end. She deserves to have her story told in full, in public, where everyone can see the truth. A plea deal feels like letting Irene off easy. Okay, Mills said. Then we go to trial. I'll let the defense know. When James told Ashley about the decision, she surprised him by nodding approvingly. Good, she said. I'm not scared to testify. I want people to know what she did. It might be hard, sweetheart. Her attorney is going to try to confuse you, make it seem like it wasn't as bad as it was. But we have the video, Ashley said simply. They can't argue with that. She was right. They couldn't. The trial began on a cold Monday in early February. The courtroom was packed with spectators, local media representatives, and a few of Irene's supporters. mostly older women from her church who'd known her for years and couldn't reconcile this news with their image of her. James and Ashley sat behind the prosecution table. Ashley wore the same blue dress from the preliminary hearing, and James wore a dark suit, both of them projecting the quiet dignity of people who'd been wronged but hadn't been broken. Irene sat at the defense table in a conservative pantsuit, her gray hair styled professionally, her expression carefully neutral. She looked like someone's grandmother, which was precisely what her attorney wanted the jury to see. Not a criminal, not an abuser, just an older woman caught in unfortunate circumstances. Jessica sat in the gallery behind Irene, and throughout the proceedings, mother and daughter would lean together, whispering, presenting a united front. James tried not to look at his soon-to-be ex-wife, tried not to feel anger at her continued blind loyalty. It wasn't worth the energy. The prosecution's opening statement was straightforward and devastating. Mills laid out the facts with clinical precision: the accusation, the violence, the injury, the evidence. She showed the jury photographs of Ashley's bruised temple, displayed the baseball bat that had been entered into evidence, and described the pattern of abuse that stretched back decades. This isn't a case about a family disagreement that got out of hand, Mills said, making eye contact with each juror. This is a case about a woman who has spent her entire life using violence to control those around her. And on October 20th, her granddaughter became her latest victim. The evidence will show beyond any reasonable doubt that Irene Collier is guilty of aggravated assault, child endangerment, and assault with a deadly weapon. And it's time, past time, that she faced consequences for her actions. The defense's opening was predictable. Irene was a loving grandmother provoked beyond endurance. Ashley had been stealing and lying. The whole thing was a tragic accident blown out of proportion by a vindictive son-in-law. Attorney Simmons painted James as controlling and manipulative, suggested that Ashley had been coached, hinted that the video had been doctored. It was all smoke and mirrors, but it was effective smoke and mirrors. James saw a few jurors nodding along, and his stomach clenched with worry. Then the evidence started coming in, and the defense's narrative crumbled like wet paper. Detective Holder testified about the investigation, the pattern of behavior, the other victims who'd come forward. The ER doctor described Ashley's injuries in medical detail, emphasizing the force required to cause that level of trauma. The forensic analyst confirmed the video's authenticity, explaining that the metadata proved it was genuine and unaltered. And then came the witnesses. Irene's son, now a 42-year-old engineer living in Portland, testified about years of abuse, about hair-pulling and thrown objects and violent rages over minor infractions. He described the ceramic plate that had scarred his forehead, the way his mother had blamed him for making her angry, the relief he'd felt when he finally escaped. Jessica's sister testified about limiting Irene's access to her grandchildren, about the bruises on her son's arm, about the fear in her daughter's eyes when Irene would visit. And through it all, Irene sat stone-faced, occasionally whispering to her attorney, never showing remorse, never acknowledging that maybe, just maybe, these people were telling the truth. On the fourth day of trial, Ashley took the stand. James watched his daughter walk to the witness box, raise her right hand, swear to tell the truth. She looked so small in the big chair, her feet barely touching the floor, but there was steel in her spine. Mills approached gently. Ashley, can you tell the jury what happened on October 20th? Ashley's voice was soft but steady as she described the evening. Her homework at the kitchen table, her grandmother's arrival, the accusation, the violence. She didn't dramatize, didn't embellish. She just told the truth in clear, simple language. When your grandmother hit you with the bat, Mills asked, "Where was your father?" He was coming inside from a porch. He was trying to get to me, but he wasn't fast enough. And your mother? She got between Dad and Grandma. She told Dad to stop attacking Grandma, but he wasn't attacking anyone. He was just trying to help me. How did that make you feel? Ashley's voice wavered slightly. Confused. Scared. I didn't understand why Mom was protecting Grandma instead of me. When the defense's turn came, Simmons approached with false warmth. Ashley, honey, you know we're all just trying to understand what really happened that night, right? I know what really happened, Ashley said. I was there. Of course you were. Now, before your grandmother arrived, had you been in her purse at all? No, ma'am. Are you sure? Maybe you were just looking for something. Maybe some candy or... Objection, Mills called. Asked and answered. Sustained, the judge said. Simmons tried different angles, suggesting Ashley had been disrespectful, that she'd provoked her grandmother, that maybe the bat hitting her was an accident, a defensive reflex. But Ashley didn't waver. She answered each question calmly, truthfully, and when Simmons tried to trip her up with contradictions, Ashley simply referred back to the video. The camera recorded everything, she said. People can watch it and see exactly what happened. I don't need to remember perfectly because it's all right there. Simmons had no response to that. How do you argue with video evidence? After Ashley's testimony, Mills played the baby monitor footage for the jury. In the silent courtroom, the only sounds were the audio from the recording. Irene's voice raised in anger. Ashley's screams, the sickening crack of impact. James watched the jurors' faces as they watched. Saw disgust, horror, sadness. Saw two of them wipe away tears. Saw the exact moment they stopped seeing Irene as a grandmother and started seeing her as a criminal. The defense tried to recover, calling character witnesses who testified about Irene's charitable work, her involvement in church, her kindness to friends. But the video had changed everything. No amount of character witnesses could erase what the jury had seen with their own eyes. In closing arguments, Mills was devastating. Ladies and gentlemen, you've heard testimony. You've seen evidence. But most importantly, you've seen video footage of the assault itself. There is no ambiguity here. No reasonable doubt. Irene Collier grabbed her granddaughter by the hair and struck her in the head with a wooden baseball bat. This is not a loving grandmother. This is a violent offender who has spent decades terrorizing family members and who finally went too far. Mills pointed to Ashley, sitting bravely beside her father. That little girl came into this courtroom and told you the truth, even though it was hard, even though it was scary. She showed more courage in 10 minutes than the defendant has shown in her entire life. And she deserves justice. The evidence demands it. The law requires it. And I'm asking you to deliver it. The jury deliberated for less than 3 hours. When they filed back in, none of them looked at Irene. James had been warned by Mills that this was a good sign. Jurors who'd voted for conviction often couldn't look at the defendant. The foreperson stood. We, the jury, find the defendant, Irene Collier, guilty on all counts. The courtroom erupted. Supporters gasped. Jessica burst into tears. Irene's face went white, then red, then white again. She turned to her attorney, saying something James couldn't hear, her hands gripping the table edge. Ashley reached for James's hand, and he squeezed it gently. It's over, he whispered. You did it. You were so brave. We did it, Ashley corrected. Together. The judge scheduled sentencing for 2 weeks later, and Irene was remanded to custody pending that hearing. James watched as bailiffs approached Irene, saw her draw herself up with dignity, saw her whisper something to Jessica before being led away. Outside the courthouse, media representatives tried to get comments, but James and Ashley hurried past them to the parking lot. Mills had already given the official statement. Justice had been served, the system had worked, and a dangerous person was off the streets. In the truck, Ashley was quiet for a long time. Then, Dad, is it okay that I don't feel happy? I thought I feel happy, but I just feel tired. James looked at his daughter, this brave soul who'd endured so much. That's normal, sweetheart. Justice isn't always satisfying. Sometimes it's just necessary. I'm glad she can't hurt anyone else now. Me too. That's what matters. They drove home through the twilight, the sky turning purple and gold, and James felt a weight lifting that he hadn't fully realized he'd been carrying. Ashley was safe. Irene would face consequences. The nightmare was ending. Not cleanly, not perfectly, but ending nonetheless. Sentencing day arrived 2 weeks later. The courtroom was less crowded this time. The verdict had been delivered, and most spectators had moved on to other dramas. But James and Ashley were there, in their now familiar seats, ready to see this through to the end. Irene was led in wearing an orange jumpsuit, looking older and smaller than she had during the trial. Prison didn't suit her. The control she'd wielded for so long had been stripped away, leaving only an elderly woman facing the consequences of a lifetime of cruelty. The prosecution recommended 12 years. The defense asked for leniency, citing Irene's age and claiming she'd learned her lesson. Jessica testified, crying, begging the judge to show mercy, insisting her mother was a good person who'd made one terrible mistake. Then the judge spoke. "Mrs. Collier, I've reviewed the evidence in this case extensively. I've read the testimony of your victims. I've watched the video of you assaulting your granddaughter, and I've come to a conclusion. You are a danger to children. You have been for a long time, and left unchecked, you will continue to be." Irene started to speak, but the judge raised a hand. "The evidence shows a pattern of behavior spanning decades. Multiple victims, multiple incidents, and through it all, you've shown no genuine remorse. Even now, in your statement to the court, you claim you were provoked, that you were defending yourself, that somehow a 12-year-old child is to blame for what you did." The judge leaned forward. "Let me be crystal clear. There is no justification for what you did. None. And the sentence needs to reflect not just this incident, but the pattern of abuse that led to it." She paused, and the courtroom held its breath. "On the charge of aggravated assault, I sentence you to 8 years in state prison. On the charge of child endangerment, 3 years to run consecutively. On the charge of assault with a deadly weapon, 2 years, also consecutive. Total sentence, 13 years in state prison, with eligibility for parole after 9 years." Gasps filled the courtroom. Jessica collapsed into sobs. Irene's face twisted with rage and disbelief. Furthermore, the judge continued, "Upon release, you will be required to register as a violent offender, and you'll be permanently barred from unsupervised contact with any children under the age of 18. These restrictions will remain in effect for the rest of your life." The gavel came down with finality, and it was done. Irene was led away, still muttering protests, still insisting she was the victim. Jessica tried to follow, but security stopped her at the gate. James watched his ex-wife crumple in the hallway, alone and crying, having lost both her mother and her daughter to choices she'd made. Part of him felt pity, but mostly he felt relief. Outside, Mills shook James's hand. "We did it. Your daughter is safe, and Irene Collier will spend significant time thinking about what she did." "Thank you," James said, meaning it deeply. "For everything." Mills smiled at Ashley. "You were the bravest witness I've ever worked with. I hope you know that." Ashley nodded shyly, and Mills left them alone in the courthouse hallway. Father and daughter stood there for a moment, letting it all sink in. Then James knelt down to Ashley's level. "It's really over," he said. "She can't hurt you anymore." "I know," Ashley said. And then, surprising them both, she started crying, not from fear or sadness, but from relief, from the release of tension she'd been holding for months. James gathered her into his arms and let her cry, right there in the courthouse hallway, not caring who saw. After a while, Ashley pulled back, wiping her eyes. "Can we go home now?" "Yeah, sweetheart. Let's go home." Spring arrived slowly that year, winter releasing its grip one cold day at a time. James and Ashley settled into their new normal: school, work, therapy sessions, quiet evenings at home. The house no longer felt haunted. The shadows held no threats. The divorce from Jessica was finalized in March. She'd signed everything without contest, and James was granted full custody, with Jessica receiving supervised visitation, visits she never actually requested. She'd chosen her path, and it led away from her daughter. In April, James got a promotion at work, recognition for his handling of a difficult project while dealing with personal crisis. The raise was substantial, and he used some of it to take Ashley on a weekend trip to Nashville, a celebration, a new memory to replace the bad ones. They visited the zoo, ate hot chicken, went to a children's museum where Ashley spent 2 hours in the science section, conducting experiments and asking questions that made the staff smile. She was blossoming, slowly becoming the person she was meant to be, without the shadow of abuse hanging over her. "Dad," Ashley said one evening in May, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset. The sky was painted in oranges and purples, birds singing their evening songs in the pine trees. Yeah, Dr. Reeves says I'm doing really well. She thinks I might not need to see her as often anymore. That's great, sweetheart. How do you feel about that? Ashley considered the question carefully, as she did most things. Good, I think. I feel lighter, like I can breathe better than I used to. James felt his throat tighten with emotion. I'm proud of you. You've worked so hard to heal. You helped, Ashley said simply. You made me feel safe. That's what Dr. Reeves says was most important, that I knew someone would protect me. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sun sink below the hills. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barked. A car drove past. Normal sounds of normal life. Dad, Ashley said again. Yeah. Thank you. For not letting her get away with it. For fighting for me. James looked at his daughter, at this remarkable young person who'd survived something no child should have to survive, and felt a surge of love so powerful it nearly overwhelmed him. Always, he said softly. I'll always fight for you, Ashley. No matter what. That's what being a parent means. Ashley leaned against him, and they watched the last of the daylight fade into darkness. But it wasn't a scary darkness anymore. It was just night coming, inevitable and natural, with stars beginning to appear overhead. They made it through. Not unscathed. The scars were there, and would always be there. But they made it through together, and they were stronger for it. In the distance, fireflies began to rise from the grass, their lights blinking in the gathering dusk. Ashley pointed them out, delighted, and James watched his daughter's face light up with wonder, with joy, with the innocence she'd almost lost but had managed to reclaim. They'd built something new from the wreckage of what came before. Not perfect, not without pain, but theirs. Safe, real. And as the stars emerged one by one in the darkening sky, James thought about Irene Collier in her prison cell, thinking about her choices, living with their consequences. He thought about Jessica, alone in her apartment, estranged from her daughter, realizing too late what she'd sacrificed. He didn't hate them. Hatred took too much energy, and he had better things to do with his energy, like raising his daughter, like building a life where violence had no place, where love meant protection and safety and truth. Justice had been served. Not perfectly, because nothing in this world was perfect, but well enough, firmly enough. Irene would spend years behind bars, and even after release, she'd never be trusted with children again. Ashley was safe. That was what mattered. That was everything. Come on, James said, standing and offering his hand to his daughter. Let's go inside. I'll make popcorn, and we can watch that movie you've been wanting to see. Ashley took his hand, standing up with a smile. The one about the wolves? The one about the wolves. They went inside together, leaving the dark behind, stepping into the warm light of their home. And as James closed the door and locked it, more from habit now than fear, he realized something fundamental had shifted. They weren't just surviving anymore. They were living. And that was the greatest victory of all.